In the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, a metropolis rose, challenging the heavens. Babylon, with its colossal walls, bronze gates and hanging gardens that gleamed like Eden itself. In power, a man who believed he commanded all the earth. Nebuchadnezzar, sovereign of sovereigns, lord of peoples and civilizations. His command was absolute. His magnificence seemed immortal, and no army dared face him, but no earthly throne remains unshakable before the God who governs over all kingdoms. This is the narrative of a monarch who went from magnificence to madness, from pride to ruin, and from humiliation to redemption, a story where the grandeur of Babylon bows before the eternity of the living God. The fortifications of Babylon rose like giants before the desert, mirroring the greatness of an empire that seemed perpetual. Gleaming towers, portals covered in bronze, warriors marching in perfect synchrony. Everything radiated authority. The Euphrates River cut through the city like a silver serpent, bringing vitality and splendor. In the epicenter of this empire, upon a golden throne supported by stone lions, sat Nebuchadnezzar, the supreme sovereign. His penetrating and determined eyes contemplated the conquered riches, and his heart overflowed with pride. "There is no empire like mine. Who would dare resist the power of Babylon?" However, amid the splendor, a defeated people wept silently. Men, women, and children from Jerusalem had been taken captive. Among them, 4 young men with firm gazes stood out. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, enslaved and brought to court, represented the hope of a God who did not remain silent, even in exile. One night, Nebuchadnezzar was troubled by a dream. His breathing became heavy. Sweat covered his forehead. Upon awakening, he shouted, "Guards, summon all the wise men, magicians, and fortune-tellers. I want them to reveal the dream and its interpretation. If they fail to do so, they shall die." The throne room filled with frightened men. One of the leaders whispered, "Your Majesty, tell us the dream and we will interpret it." But the king roared, "No, you must tell me what I dreamed and also the meaning. This way I'll know if you're not deceiving me." Panic spread. No one dared speak. Then the decree was issued. All the wise men would be executed. Among them was Daniel, who upon hearing the sentence looked to the sky and said to his friends, "Let us pray to the God of heaven, for only he can reveal what is hidden." That night, Daniel received the revelation in visions. At dawn, he was brought before the king. The imposing hall was silent except for the sound of the sovereign's breathing. Nebuchadnezzar gazed at him with disdain. "So, can you tell me the dream I had?" Daniel humbly replied, "There is no wise man or magician. There is no fortune-teller who can reveal this mystery, O king, but there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets. He has shown you what is to come." The king leaned forward, intrigued, and Daniel continued, "In your dream, you saw a great statue. Its head was of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet part iron and part clay. As you watched, a stone cut without human hands struck the feet of the statue and shattered it. The entire idol was reduced to dust, carried away by the wind, and the stone became a mountain that filled the whole earth." Silence took over the hall. Nebuchadnezzar's eyes widened, for these were exactly the images that tormented him. He stood up abruptly, the golden robe dragging on the floor. "That's it, that's exactly what I saw." Daniel concluded, "You are the head of gold, O king. God has given you power, strength, and glory, but after you will come other kingdoms until the Most High establishes an eternal kingdom that will never be destroyed." Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, his pride mixed with fear. For a moment his heart trembled before the revelation of a power greater than his own. He prostrated himself and declared before the court, "Surely your God is God of gods and Lord of kings." But although he had recognized the glory of the Most High, the seed of pride had not been uprooted. The king's heart remained swollen, and the idea of being just one part of a statue deeply disturbed him. Deep down, a spark of defiance began to grow. If he was the head of gold, he would make himself not just a part, but the totality of glory. And so, while the palace resonated with the triumph of interpretation, Nebuchadnezzar was already secretly plotting the construction of something that would forever mark his sovereignty. The distant roar of Babylon's furnaces echoed, foreshadowing a new act of the divine drama that was just beginning. The sun burned high over the plain of Dura, where King Nebuchadnezzar had ordered the construction of a monument never before seen. Dust rose under the workers' feet, while hammers thundered and ropes pulled blocks covered in gold. When the last piece was put in place, a colossal statue stood before the crowd, shimmering in the light as if it were the sun itself. It was not just the golden head of the dream, but the entire statue, from feet to crown, covered in pure gold. It was the reflection of the arrogance of a man who refused to be merely part of a greater destiny. On the appointed day, peoples, nations, and tongues gathered before the statue. Drums rumbled, trumpets echoed, and the king's herald proclaimed with a firm voice, "O peoples of all the earth, as decreed by Nebuchadnezzar, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, flute, harp, lyre, and all kinds of music, bow down and worship the statue the king has erected. Anyone who does not bow down will immediately be cast into the burning furnace." The crowd trembled. The sound of instruments filled the air, and like waves, everyone fell face down before the golden image. All except three figures who remained firm: Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Their eyes did not turn to the statue, but to the invisible sky above them. Soldiers grabbed them and dragged them to the king's makeshift throne. Nebuchadnezzar, with flaming eyes, stood up and shouted, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not worship my golden statue? I give you one last chance. When you hear the music, bow down. Otherwise, you will be cast into the furnace, and what God will be able to save you from my hand?" The three young men, even when surrounded by warriors, responded with serenity. Hananiah spoke first. "O Nebuchadnezzar, we need not answer you about this. Behold, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace and from your hand. But if he does not know, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor worship the statue you have erected." Nebuchadnezzar's face contorted with rage. He shouted to the guards, "Heat the fire 7 times hotter, bind them and cast them in now." The flames roared like enraged beasts. The soldiers who approached were consumed by the heat, falling dead at the edge of the furnace. But the three young men were thrown inside. The crowd held its breath. The king on his throne leaned forward to see better. His eyes, accustomed to victory, now widened. "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" "Yes, O king." "Then I see 4 men loose, walking unharmed in the flames, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Silence fell over the plain. The fire that was meant to consume became the stage for a miracle. The young men walked through the flames, as if crossing a garden, and the radiance of divine presence shone. Nebuchadnezzar stood with a choked voice. "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." They came out, and the crowd marveled. Not a single hair burned, nor any smell of smoke on their clothes. The shaken king proclaimed before everyone, "Blessed be the God of these men, who sent his angel and delivered his servants. Therefore I decree that no people speak against this God, for there is no other who can deliver like this." The crowd cheered, but inside Nebuchadnezzar's heart, the battle was still not won. He had recognized divine power, but his soul remained dominated by the thirst for glory. For him, the experience was not surrender, but a confrontation with a mysterious force that needed to be understood or challenged. That night, the king wandered alone through the marble corridors of the palace. His hands touched the cold walls, and his thoughts burned hotter than the flames that could not consume the young men. If this God governs over everything, Why did he choose me to reign? Why does he show me signs, but not take the scepter from me? Perhaps it's because I'm still destined for something greater. The night wind passed through the columns, bringing the echo of trumpets that had announced the worship of the statue. Nebuchadnezzar breathed deeply, trying to understand the mysteries. But while seeking answers, a new omen began to take shape. Something more disturbing than the golden statue or the fiery furnace. And in the depths of night, the king would close his eyes to find another vision that would change the course of his life forever. Night fell over Babylon, but Nebuchadnezzar's heart found no peace. He walked restlessly through the hanging gardens, illuminated by torches that danced in the wind. The murmur of water falling in cascades did not ease the weight on his mind. Suddenly, a dream seized him with force. It was so vivid it seemed more real than being awake. He saw before him a gigantic tree that reached the heavens. Its branches spread across all the earth, and all creatures found shelter in its shade. Birds made nests among its green leaves, animals rested under its canopy, and people fed on its abundant fruits. The king gazed with pride at that majestic tree until a powerful voice echoed from the heavens. "Cut down the tree and destroy it. However, leave the stump with its roots in the ground, bound with chains of iron and bronze, until the dew of heaven passes over it, and it is humbled among the wild animals. 7 times shall pass until you acknowledge that the Most High rules over the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he wishes." The vision disappeared, but Nebuchadnezzar's heart remained in torment. Upon awakening, his body trembled, and he immediately ordered, "Bring me Daniel. Only he can reveal this mystery." Daniel entered the palace humble as always and bowed before the king. Nebuchadnezzar, anxious, described every detail of the dream, his voice choked with unease. When he finished, there was silence as they watched the prophet. Daniel lowered his head and his expression became serious. "Tell me the truth, however hard it may be. Speak." Daniel took a deep breath, then responded with sorrow, "O king, if only the dream were against your enemies. The tree you saw is you, Nebuchadnezzar. Your kingdom has spread to the ends of the earth, and your glory has reached the heavens. But the decree of the Most High is this: you will be driven from men and will dwell with the beasts of the field. You will eat grass like oxen, and the dew of heaven will wet your body. You will remain thus for 7 times until you acknowledge that the Most High rules over kingdoms and gives them to whomever he desires. However, as it was said that the stump and roots would remain, this means that your kingdom will be returned to you when you acknowledge that heaven reigns." The words echoed through the hall like thunder. The king remained silent, staring intently at Daniel. His wounded pride fought against the fear burning within him. Daniel, with a gentle voice, added, "Therefore, O king, accept my counsel. Renounce your sins by practicing righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps this way you will prolong your tranquility." Nebuchadnezzar rose from the throne with heavy steps and walked toward the terrace. His eyes wandered over the moonlit walls, the incense-filled temples, and the streets bustling with life. He clenched his fists and muttered, "How can a man be compared to a cut-down tree? How can the greatest king on earth be cast to the ground like an animal? No, I will not accept this fate. Babylon is eternal, and I am its crown." Daniel silently withdrew, knowing that the king's words revealed more than just stubbornness. They were signs that the prophecy was about to be fulfilled. The following days brought apparent calm. Nebuchadnezzar resumed his routine of banquets, parades, and political decisions. The nobles bowed before him, and the city continued to acclaim his name. In his heart, the shadow of the dream would not depart. Sometimes at night he would wake with a start, hearing the echo of the heavenly voice, 7 times shall be fulfilled. A full year passed. The king seemed to have forgotten the warning. His heart, intoxicated by glory, ignored the call to humility. He continued building temples and palaces, convinced that his greatness would never end. Until one afternoon, as he gazed at the horizon from the royal terrace, the sun's rays reflecting off the golden walls, Nebuchadnezzar opened his arms and exclaimed with a resounding voice capable of echoing throughout the city, "Is not this great Babylon that I have built by the power of my strength and for the glory of my majesty?" The words still echoed when suddenly a voice from heaven broke the silence. "O Nebuchadnezzar, it has been declared to you, the kingdom has departed from you. You will be driven from men, and your dwelling will be with the beasts of the field until you learn that the Most High rules over kingdoms and gives them to whomever he wishes." The king trembled, his body swayed, his mind plunged into darkness. His eyes, once full of pride, now lost their reason. The guards ran to support him, but he roared like a beast, tearing off the royal cloak, falling to the ground before everyone. And so the dream of the felled tree began to come true. The palace of Babylon fell into silence after the heavenly cry. The nobles drew back, the guards looked at each other in fear, and the king, once absolute sovereign, fell to his knees, tearing off his royal ornaments as if they were useless weights. His eyes lost the shine of reason. His body, overtaken by spasms, moved like that of a cornered animal. The servants shouted, but no one dared approach. Heaven's decree had been fulfilled. Nebuchadnezzar was expelled from his own court. The man who ruled peoples and nations now wandered through the fields around the city. His bare feet sank into the damp earth, and his mouth, once full of powerful decrees, was filled with herbs and roots. His beard grew disheveled, his hair lengthened and hardened like feathers, and his nails curved like sharp claws. The shepherds, taking their flocks, saw him from afar and murmured among themselves, "Is it him? Is this King Nebuchadnezzar, the conqueror of Jerusalem, the Lord of the land? Yes, but the Most High humbled him. Who can resist his hand?" Days turned into months, and months into years. The king lived under the morning dew, howling at the moonlight, and the beasts of the field became his companions. His mind, consumed by madness, wandered between shadows and fragmented memories. Sometimes a still human roar echoed from his lips, "My Babylon, my glory!" But then his voice was lost in animalistic growls. Inside the city, the throne was empty. The nobles ruled in silence, fearing to conspire against the king, for they still considered him untouchable by divine decree. 7 ages passed. 7 long periods of humiliation in which the proud one was reduced to dust. Nature marked his body, but also prepared his soul. Thus, on a quiet morning when the sun was rising over the golden fields, something different happened. Nebuchadnezzar lifted his eyes to the sky. For the first time in years, his mind opened and the darkness dissipated like smoke before the wind. He breathed deeply, feeling the breeze on his face, and murmured clearly, the heavens reign." And in that moment, his reason was restored to him. The animal fell silent, and the man became king again. He prostrated himself face to the ground and wept, not from pride, but from repentance. His tears mixed with the earth, and his heart was broken before the Most High. Still in the field, voices echoed among the guards who watched him from afar. "It's the king! Look, he has regained his reason. See his eyes. They're no longer filled with madness." They ran, and soon the news reached the city. The nobles gathered, and Daniel, in the midst of the crowd, raised his voice. "The Most High God has fulfilled what he said. Now, as he promised, he will return the kingdom to his servant." Nebuchadnezzar was taken back to the palace. His clothes were changed, his body washed, his beard trimmed. When he re-entered the throne room, the marble columns echoed the steps of a transformed man. He no longer walked with his chest puffed with arrogance, but with the bearing of one who had faced judgment and received mercy. The people crowded the streets. When they saw the restored king, they did not hear decrees of personal glory from him, but a song of surrender. I, Nebuchadnezzar, lift my eyes to the heavens and bless the Most High. His sovereignty is eternal, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. The inhabitants of the earth are as nothing before him, for he does as he pleases with the army of heaven and among men. No one can stay his hand or ask, "What are you doing?" The words, full of truth, echoed like thunder over the crowd. Those who once feared him now respected him in a new way, not for the power of his sword, but for the authority of his experience with the God of heaven. But deep inside the king, there was still something to be said. He needed to testify before everyone, not just his people, but all nations, that human pride is dust before divine majesty. And so his mouth opened again to proclaim, this time not his glory, but that of the eternal God. And while the city celebrated his return, Nebuchadnezzar knew his story was no longer that of a conqueror, but of a man who had been broken and restored to serve as an example to all the kings of the earth. The cheers were still echoing when the king, seated once more on the throne, asked for silence with a gesture. The light that came through the tall windows spilled over the marble and reshaped the room as if the sky, not gold, reigned there. Nebuchadnezzar took a deep breath. His gaze no longer had the hard gleam of pride, but the firmness of someone who had experienced ruin and found mercy. He began to speak, and there were no fanfares, just truth. Peoples, nations, and tongues, listen. I, Nebuchadnezzar, once raised my heart like a tower, but I was brought down, lived among the animals, ate the grass of the field, and lost my sanity. Then I lifted my eyes to the heavens and understood. The Most High reigns and gives the kingdom to whom he wills. A murmur spread through the hall. The princes who once bowed out of fear now bowed with respect. Daniel remained in the shadow of a column, attentive. The king continued, "Issue a decree throughout my entire empire. Let this story be published so that the proud may remember, glory belongs to God." The scribes approached with tablets and papyrus. Nebuchadnezzar dictated with pauses, as if weighing each syllable. I saw a tree that reached the heavens. I was like that tree and was cut down, but the stump was bound with iron and bronze, and the dew of heaven covered me until I confessed that heaven reigns. Then my reason was returned to me. My honor was restored, and I returned to the throne not by merit, but by grace. Daniel, called by the king, approached. Nebuchadnezzar looked at him with gratitude. Man of God, your word was faithful. What counsel do you now offer to a king who has returned from dust? Daniel answered gently, Be just, have mercy on the poor, judge without bribery, honor the God who raised you. The king nodded as if finally finding the way. Then new days began in Babylon. Taxes were eased. Judgments became swift and just. The temples of idols fell silent, and the palace doors opened to the humble. In the squares, people spoke of the king's miracle. Some mocked in secret, others with tearful eyes repeated, Heaven reigns. One afternoon, on the terrace where he had once boasted, Nebuchadnezzar gazed at the city. The sun was setting, igniting the walls with a light not from gold, but from twilight itself. Beside him, Daniel remained silent. The king said, Here was my downfall, here I confessed, here also begins my testimony. As night fell, the king called a meeting in the great courtyard. Torches burned like earthly constellations. Amid the people, the 3 young men who came out of the furnace were visible, firm, and composed. Nebuchadnezzar raised his voice. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, before everyone I give thanks for your God. I wish I had learned from your fire before knowing my madness. Hananiah replied, The Almighty writes straight on crooked lines we cannot see. Then the herald read the final proclamation, "Let it be known throughout my empire, heaven reigns, pride leads to downfall, and the Most High can humble those who walk in arrogance." It was not a threat, but a loving warning carrying the weight of a life shattered and rebuilt. That same night, Nebuchadnezzar went to his chambers. Before sleeping, he knelt. "Lord of the heavens, I who thought I was master of time was counted like the dew of a morning. Keep me in truth." The room became quiet. The city breathed, and the stars seemed to lean over Babylon. Over the years, the king's reputation changed color. From a feared conqueror, he became a wise sovereign. Travelers would say, "In Babylon, a man tasted dust and found true glory." In schools, boys learn not only laws and measurements, but also the song of the restored king. And when Nebuchadnezzar's days were fulfilled, there was no despair in the palace. There was a ceremony. He called his officials and said, "The stone that strikes the feet of iron and clay will fill the earth. Governments will come and go, but the unshakable kingdom remains."